The Ron DeSantis presidential campaign, to call it crumbling may be an overstatement in the sense that it suggests there was really something there at any point. But the latest news is that a Ron DeSantis Super PAC has ended door knocking in some crucial states, suggesting that even his own supporters no longer have any confidence in him. The Super PAC is called Never Back Down. They've been door knocking in Nevada. They've been door knocking in Super Tuesday states. Super Tuesday, of course, is that day in March when there's a whole bunch of primaries in one day and a ton of delegates up for grabs. And if at this point in time they are already backing off of door knocking in those states, it is a very, very bad sign. Now, of course, anytime you inquire about this specifically, you're given the typical runaround. This is a strategic realignment. We're redeploying resources, just like when the campaign fired like 24 people and then said, we're just realigning and redeploying, but they didn't hire anybody new. So it's just a downsizing. It's because you're not raising enough money. It's because the campaign isn't going well. If we look at the polling, there is not a particularly remarkable story to tell, at least not compared with where we were a week ago or where we were at the time of the first Republican debate on August 23rd. You still have Donald Trump in a commanding lead with somewhere in the mid-50s% of the Republican support. The rest of all the Republican candidates are divvying up 45%. DeSantis is at 14. He has seen the tiniest of tiny bumps from like 13.8 to 14.3. The Vivek Ramaswamy surge seems to have ended. He topped out at about 7.5 and is now down to 7. The one maybe more remarkable polling indicator is that Nikki Haley is up to 6. This is by far as high as Nikki Haley has ever been. She's being talked about as, hey, maybe she could actually do something in New Hampshire and gain some momentum. Who knows? But let's talk about what happens now and see if we can take a historical approach to understanding, is it over for DeSantis or not? Now, let's leave all of the caveats about the unprecedented nature of running against a former president in a primary, Trump's criminal indictments. Let's just put that all aside for a second and talk about the history. Can DeSantis win historically? And what I mean by that is, how often has it happened that the person in second place or worse in a Republican or a Democratic primary at this point, we're in September of the year before the election, has it happened before that someone in second or worse place in September of the year before the election actually ended up being the nominee? And the answer is yes. There's a number of different examples. Jimmy Carter in 1976, before the Iowa caucuses in early 76, so late 75, Jimmy Carter was not a front runner. He was not the de facto leader. He was not any of those things. He eventually emerged and he won the nomination and won the presidency. So that's one example. Bill Clinton in 1992. At the beginning of the Democratic primary, Clinton was not the clear front runner. There were a bunch of different challenges he was facing. The personal issues, which plagued him for his entire career, were a factor. Then the whole comeback kid thing happened, the New Hampshire primary. And as we all know, Bill Clinton ultimately won the nomination and ultimately became president of the United States. John Kerry in 2004, who ultimately lost to George W. Bush in the general, Kerry was not the guy who everybody assumed would win. There was the Howard Dean phase until he screamed that we're going to Iowa and then D.C. or whatever. Dean was considered the front runner for a while, but Kerry, who was trailing in the polls, won the Iowa caucuses, won the New Hampshire primary, and the rest is history, ultimately winning the nomination and, of course, losing the general. And then John McCain from 2008 is another example. In the summer of 2007, which is roughly where we are now, we're getting into fall equivalent to 2007, the McCain campaign seemed potentially to be in jeopardy. And the poll numbers were not great, fundraising was not great, but come January of 2008, things turned around. He was the front runner before he knew it. He won the nomination, ultimately lost to eventual President Barack Obama. So the takeaway from historical polling and where we are right now, September of the year before, is not the problem for Ron DeSantis. Many candidates eventually became the nominees when they were in DeSantis's position, which is a pretty solid second. What I mean is he's losing to Trump by like 40, but he's doubling the person in third place, Vivek Ramaswamy. So the numbers are not the problem for Ron DeSantis. The problems for Ron DeSantis are, number one, the trajectory, which is he was polling 31 at the beginning of this year, and he's lost more than half of that. The trajectory isn't good at all for DeSantis. And then more importantly, if you are running against a former president, which is what Ron DeSantis is doing, it is tougher. Now, Rachel Bitecofer warned us 2 weeks ago, don't read too much into this. Nobody pays attention until Labor Day. Many people don't pay attention until November, December, whatever the case may be. Although she is, of course, correct, it is also unprecedented that the guy who has the commanding lead among those who are paying attention, admittedly, that may only be a part of the entire electorate, the guy who has the commanding lead was the president and also seems to be in serious control of the Republican Party. So we can just wait and see. The nobody pays attention until Labor Day thing, we're now beyond Labor Day. People are starting to pay attention. And so where I would put it is this. Any of these other people could surge, could come back, whatever. But if they're going to do it, they have about 8 weeks to show that there's life in their campaigns. If this doesn't change, we will be just weeks from the first primaries. If Trump gets those, I just don't see any way that anybody but Trump wins. If you disagree with me, certainly let me know. And of course, there's always the possibility of self-inflicted errors from Trump. Let's talk about that a little bit next.